Hey everyone, today we're starting with a video that we want to show you, and I hope that you see it first before listening to the conversation, because we're going to be talking about biases, and one of them is the confirmation bias, and I want you to experience it first and foremost. So here we go. I will put the link to this post in the comments so that you can see it and see the original links and check out the author.
Let me show you how confirmation bias works in 60 seconds. I'm going to play a sound, and whichever one of these two words you're reading at the time of the sound, that's what you're going to hear. Ready? Let me play it again in case you thought there was some kind of shenanigans. The way confirmation bias works is whatever idea we get in our head, that's what we see out in the world. Now, let me tell you why it matters. Confirmation bias can wreak havoc on projects, just like this very experiment. You get an idea of how something's supposed to go, or you're asking for feedback from customers, and they're telling you one thing, but you're hearing something completely different because that's what you were expecting to hear. Just knowing that confirmation bias exists does not make it any less powerful in dragging you down. You need to.
Oh yeah, that was that. Hi, Roelof.
Hello,
Welcome to the confirmation bias discussion.
Yeah.
That was quite an interesting one. Did you hear the word that you were looking at, or
the first time I ever saw this video, it really, really hit me because I really did hear the two different words, and I just hadn't thought that something like that was, that physically possible. So it really is an incredible demonstration of just how powerful and just how powerful confirmation bias can be, and that we're all very, very much subject to it. So I guess,
Just I want to say that just that as the author says there, because we know about it doesn't mean that we're immune to it, and I think it's a very powerful message.
Yeah, in fact, what you can see is that you're not immune to it. It's you have it constantly. So even just being aware of it doesn't help you say, "Oh, I'm just aware of it," so it doesn't happen. It does happen. So we all have confirmation bias, and I guess we just have to figure out ways of, combating it or learning to live with it. Put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. So, shall we talk a bit about what confirmation bias is a bit in detail, or shall we directly go into how to deal with that?
So, well, let's talk a bit about confirmation bias and things and some examples of it. So, one particular type of confirmation bias we have, which occurs every single day, is that of the factors that we tend to extrapolate what happened in the past into the future. So we just say, look, this is the way it was going. So these are the graphs that you see, and you also see it in texts when you read an article. It'll say things like, we are seeing more and more of this, or less and less of that, and it's been presented as something that's almost an autonomous process. And those are probably all examples of confirmation bias. Things we've seen in the past, we tend to extrapolate into the future. And I continue with working with startups. Of course, they have to give projections, and investors are asking that. A lot of confirmation bias is going on, and a lot of, I think, companies actually fail because of this. They tend to think, okay, so it's going to be this way, so they do not explore, or they do not validate sufficiently because of confirmation bias things going on. So it's something to realize that it's not just a theoretical thing, it's a very real thing, and it's happening every single day around you, and you're probably doing it yourself. All of us are.
What's the function of it? Let's philosophize a bit for a moment here. What's good about having a confirmation bias?
So the psychological reason for it, or the evolutionary reason for it, is actually also very powerful. It's always good to realize that something that comes with a tremendous cost must also be providing a tremendous benefit. And the tremendous benefit is in terms of not having to continually analyze a particular situation, that you can very quickly, this is. Let's take the example. I think we had that last week also. We were talking about the danger of an animal being hunted on the savannas, the lion. The confirmation bias is that you very quickly jump to the conclusion that's a lion and it's coming to eat me. And you don't at that point want to have a sort of abstract discussion with yourself. Well, maybe it's something else, It doesn't have to be. It could be the light playing tricks. No, generally speaking, you want the situation to get out fast. So probably all philosophical zebras have long since departed this planet, because they were philosophizing about whether it might be playing tricks. And in the meantime, it did turn out to be a lion. So it helps the brain make very rapid decisions, which are often right. Or maybe we can say they're usually right. Most of the times, they do result in a correct conclusion. So that's also where confirmation bias becomes very, very sneaky, because it's not that you continue going to the wrong conclusion. It's just that you sometimes come to the wrong conclusion. And so, for example, going back to our evolutionary story, the wrong conclusion, there's an asymmetry. So, I mean, if you jump too quickly and you run and it wasn't a lion, no big deal. If you didn't run and it was a lion, it is a big deal. But here we get into decision making where that asymmetry is no longer present. It might be a very big deal if you do jump to the wrong conclusion. If you're putting a product out onto the market, for example, and your confirmation bias has made you come to the conclusion, that it's a valid concept, or, the market there's an enormous market, so let's put an enormous marketing budget on that. Well, that could destroy your company, your startup. So this is where confirmation bias, can become a genuine problem. Also, sometimes it's not necessary, because this confirmation bias is about speed. It's about being able to come to a decision very, very quickly in a dangerous situation, something we would biologically develop to do. But many of the decisions we have don't have that characteristic. It could be an hour or a day or 2 days. We're not talking a 3-second or 5-second decision frame. So the confirmation bias is getting in the way of a decision-making process that we never had, 10 or 100,000 years ago.
Such an important point to point out. And I have discussions with some of my clients who are always on their phone, like replying to texts and taking the calls, whatever they're in, and just within seconds. And quite often I say to them, okay, I texted you because there was time for me to do it. Why are you replying right now if you're in the middle of something else?
Yeah.
There is no urgency. We are doing this communication on terms of each of us. It's not a matter of going bankrupt for your company if you don't answer my reply to my text in the moment. Why are you creating those urgencies for yourself and creating the stress that way?
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that we're not in the savannah anymore.
Yeah. So this is one of the examples when you're in a discussion with someone, it's emotional, and then one of the things you learn is, or you hope you learn, probably after a few painful lessons, is if you're angry and you write an email, at least sleep on it before you send it out. And I think in 100% of the cases that I did that, I never sent the email. I never sent that email that I thought, that big text. I might write it, and then at a certain point I got smart enough to realize, wait till tomorrow before I send it. And I would never ever send it, which told me a lot. But in fact, what often happens is and I've seen some real examples very recently, is that a lot of confirmation bias actually goes on. You did this, and then you said that, and then someone, it actually turns out they didn't do quite that. They did something else, and and they did it because of something you didn't know about, and so on. So you start a lot of these discussions go wrong because you start filling in a lot of gaps that you have on the basis of confirmation bias. So you say, well, you did that. It was because you thought whatever, but it turned out they weren't thinking that at all. There was something completely different going on. And you'll see a lot of arguments are going around because of this. So we all have our own bias. We fill in the gaps, exactly that. It's just as on the savannah, you see some reflections there, you fill in that and say, oh, that's a line. But all you have are fragments of what's going on. So this is where confirmation bias plays a role too.
Mm. So what could the leaders that are watching this video do to help themselves not fall flat on their face with the confirmation bias?
Two obvious things. One, as we just mentioned, is just delay the conclusion, decision making conclusion. Just sometimes just give yourself exactly what you said. It's not. Is it absolutely urgent? Maybe it makes sense just to delay the conclusion. That doesn't necessarily mean delaying action. So we're not talking about once you've made a conclusion, then doesn't necessarily delay action. So it's not about procrastinating, but it is delaying perhaps either decision making or the conclusion. So you're giving yourself more time, because at that point you may start, figuring out, oh, there may be something more here. Do I know all the facts? When you get yourself in the state of mind where you ask that question, that's already helping, because you might say, well, maybe not. Maybe there's something else that I'm not sure about. Maybe I need to ask a couple of questions. So that's one obvious one. And the second
I want to pause here for a moment, because we're talking a lot to entrepreneurs, Roelof, and there is the speed of decision making is so important, right? And all this culture of failing fast, failing forward is very present. It's omnipresent. So how does that go together with delaying the decisions, or how do you mentor your mentees to do that?
Failing fast is actually meant to expose confirmation bias. It works together. It's about taking a hypothesis you have, a certain conclusion you have, and exposing it to the real world. So those two go very, very closely together. You do it precisely because you're trying to get confirmation bias out of the way as soon as possible. You're trying to get your conclusions, validated with genuine real world exposure.
But what you're saying is that delaying the decision doesn't mean not trying to take action to see what's working and what doesn't.
Yeah. So you're delaying the decision in order to allow yourself to either get more facts, more perceptions, perhaps more options. And also, the second thing is that you might actually just, discuss it with other people who have another perspective on that. And, and they may also have confirmation bias, but it may be a different one. So it gives, again, it's exposing your bias, to other real world situations. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your confirmation bias. You don't see it, but someone else may see it. Or you try to get a process where you will see it by asking that question: do I have all the facts? And you can maybe start saying, oh yeah, I thought that, but why am I thinking that? What leads me to believe that that's a correct fact? And if you get into that process, that's going to be a way to help you, at least to battle some of the confirmation bias that's in your brain.
Great. So what was the second thing that you wanted to mention here as the obvious one?
No, I just did. The fact that you give yourself more time, then it also gives you an opportunity to discuss it or the thought with other people. And they will
so basically those are two together.
Yeah, they come together. So that's the reason that you want to delay a decision, is that you really want to get more facts or to get more exposure of. So it's either perhaps get more experts, but it's also to see whether there's confirmation bias or other types of cognitive bias. Maybe that might lead us into the second part of this talk, which is that confirmation bias is just one of the many kind of biases that you can have.
Just summarizing what you've said right now to put it on the screen. So what we're talking about here is that you should delay your decision-taking point to get some time to question what you're gonna take action on, your decision, right? At the same time, use that time not to procrastinate, as you said, Roelof, but to actually test run your ideas on the others to hopefully shed some light on the blind spots of you and your confirmation biases so that you can actually take a more holistic and picture into account when you take a decision.
That's a nice summary. Yes, that's it.
Great, great. So if we now zoom out a bit and look from the higher perspective, 50 cognitive biases that we have. That's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, and then maybe more.
So
well, obviously there are more, but yeah, quite a few of them there. So it's good. Are you able to pull up the infographic?
Yes,
on your screen?
I am on it.
You're on
there
it.
We go. Here we see it. I'll take away the banners that we see more. So here there are different color codes, right? There are memory related cognitive bias, social learning, belief, money, and politics. And let me drop this link into the comment as well so that everyone can look at the whole post later on. Here we see quite a list of them.
Yeah,
a list
so
of different
there we
ones.
see the confirmation bias there in the middle row. Just to show that it's in there. One of many.
Wait.
Have I? You passed by it now, I think.
Yeah.
It was an UFO symbol.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. Yeah. So we actually talked, I believe, or maybe no, I wrote about quite recently the one coincidentally next door to confirmation bias, which is the backfire effect. And the backfire effect, did we talk about it? We did, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And the backfire effect was the fact that sometimes just bringing more facts to a discussion on vaccination, we were talking about, in this case, COVID vaccination, will actually just confirm people their belief that, that they're right and you're wrong. So again, that's a form of cognitive bias that goes on. And maybe we just want to pick up, maybe you want to just pick up one or two and we could discuss it.
Absolutely.
Another one, actually, there's an interesting one, which is the top, on the top middle, anchoring.
I was just looking at that one.
Yeah. So anchoring is actually something that you will see that salespeople will do. So, for example, they're trying to sell you a TV, for example. So what will typically happen, or could happen, is that they will anchor you in the sense of pricing by showing you the most expensive model first, and and then show all the things, and then they say, well, that's top of the line. Maybe that's not that's just not what you want to put out. So let's go and look for a cheaper model. So they've anchored you on a very expensive model. So the model that they're going to show you after that was probably up to that point you might have thought it was very expensive, but because you've been anchored to an even more expensive model, you're now starting to consider that to be the cheaper model. So it's so that's an example of anchoring. So
I really loved one of the phrases that I learned during my master studies in project management, and that one was, "It all depends on the reference point." That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly that. So when you're anchoring this, So it's often good to think about anchoring it is a bias. So when somebody, it's and that's, I mean, it happens if you're in a conversation, in a meeting, and someone says, well, it's only going to be 300K, you know. Well, of course, with using the word only, they're anchoring the conversation as that's going to be, that's fine. So anchoring is continually, is occurring, and you use it yourself, others use it, but it's
Mm.
always good to realize, oh, that's an anchor. So they're often putting that anchor in order to drag it close to their viewpoint. And
Do you have examples from the startup world, entrepreneurship world, or leadership context in general, or like in particular, with the anchor and bias?
it's a good question. Yeah, so one example of where I see anchoring going on is this idea that you build a startup and VCs are thinking about exits in 4 years or 5 years or something like that, and it's based on their own financial needs. Really, they want to get a certain return on investment, very high one, because a lot of startups fail, and in order to get the return on investment that they want, the company has to grow by a certain rate within a certain period. So they put an anchoring in there of their expectations, which may have absolutely nothing to do with the natural organic business growth that might be needed for that startup. I mean, that could easily be a lot of excellent startups take 10 years to grow and mature. So, if you've been anchored to this 3 or 4 year, which I often see, it's going to be very difficult, because then you're following a timeline and a path that is probably may not be healthy for the company. So it may be forced fed, just almost like a goose for pate. It could be force fed and die because it's just having to go. So that's an example of anchoring that I do see, to mention one. And of course, there are many, because we're continually anchoring, trying to say what's reasonable. I mean, when we say what's reasonable, then that is also a form of anchoring, really, because, if this is reasonable, then a lot of other things, of course, are probably unreasonable. But they're all just genuine anchors to take that.
Yeah, it's all relative. So would you say that more data is the way of addressing this particular cognitive bias?
No, I don't think it's a question of more data. I'm not quite sure what kind of data here would be relevant. Maybe you say, well, if they knew that a lot of companies take 10 years, that's a different anchoring. Maybe it's a question of being skeptical about what people, say, okay, I hear what you're saying. So, but as I say, the old expression was trust but verify. Just, if somebody says something, do you accept it? Or do you accept it as an implicit truth, or are you able to say that, this is a potential statement, but there may be other statements? So that's more of a mindset of discuss. Again, this is about discussing, taking conclusions, trying to understand, uncover what your implicit assumptions are. So the process, again, for that, and that's kind of nice. It's for any confirmation, not confirmation, but any cognitive bias is about this. It's trying to understand, am I jumping too quickly to conclusion? Do I have all the facts? Are there assumptions that I'm making that I'm not aware of? These are the things. Do other people think differently? You know, why this conclusion? Could it be a different conclusion? These are all methods, and actually you'll see some of this also in brainstorming techniques. A lot of brainstorming, good brainstorming, is about trying to get cognitive bias out of the picture. So a lot of techniques that you use, that's actually, I just realized that as we're talking here. So a lot of techniques we use in brainstorming, really focus about how do we remove cognitive bias, because cognitive bias is what sort of straps us in and keeps us going down a particular path, the particular conclusion. So that's a kind of nice conclusion, a nice link to make there. So, and I guess it might be worthwhile looking at it from a brainstorming session and the techniques from this viewpoint of how does it help remove cognitive bias, and what kinds of cognitive bias, are being taken out with particular techniques.
Fascinating. I like this one, status quo bias. Shall we talk about that one as well?
Sure.
So here it says, we tend to prefer things to stay the same. Changes from the baseline are considered to be a loss.
Yeah. So this is, as many things, there's a very good reason for this. This is resistance to change that we're looking at here. And of course, change management is all about trying to tackle this. But there's a very good reason for that, because things may be the way they are for a very good reason. And in fact, a lot of things are the way they are for a very good reason. We don't have chairs with 5 legs for a very good reason, because 4 are sufficient, or even 3. So if somebody comes and makes a chair with five legs, it's correct to be skeptical, or at least to explore. Does it make sense to change this? Because it takes effort. You have to throw away the old chair, get a new chair. So it's good to realize that that a lot of changes are not beneficial. That's an interesting statement. People, a lot of changes turn out to be, and if you look, what we do know is that, looking in the past, that we tend to think that 50% of the things that we thought were good 10 years ago, turn out to be wrong. Look at food diets. If we look at any food diet or anything about that's 20 years ago, 20 years old, we'll often say a lot of the thoughts there, they didn't make sense. And that same thing happens today. So it does make sense to be conservative. On the other hand, of course, improvement does come through change. So you have this battle going on. So the status quo bias is a cognitive, because it's if I have to choose to do something, it's better to do it in a way that I know worked in the past, generally speaking, than to try something new which I don't know about. So you're taking on additional risk, and generally speaking, you want to mitigate or reduce your risk as much as possible, whatever you're doing. On the other hand, if you don't take any risk, you can't improve. So you can't improve your performance. So there's this battle going on.
I don't feel like we're making it easy for people to watching us. Biases everywhere. So what would you say? What is the lowest hanging fruit, or this kind of cornerstone habit that the viewers can take to actually be able to tackle the biases in a healthy way, or start on that journey at least?
It's questioning. It's putting the question out. Do I have the right conclusions? What are my assumptions? What is making me think this way? So it's self-awareness of your situation, of yourself. Why are they thinking that way? Why are they acting that way? Why am I acting this way? Should I be acting this way? Should they be acting? It's really that. And that's actually also kind of scientific method. Also, the way that you get new knowledge. It's about being open and being skeptical to a degree, and discussing with that and exposing your ideas or conclusions to others for critical feedback. So there's nothing new going on there. What you can do is, of course, is be better aware of the types of cognitive biases. So, go through that list and try to think of situations where you see it occurring. Because if you will recognize, it'll be much more easier for you to recognize when you might be succumbing to cognitive bias.
And I think it's good what you said earlier, discuss things with someone who is in your field of expertise, just to get an expert opinion other than your own, or at the dinner table, for example, just talk about the things that you're thinking, or the actions that you're planning to take tomorrow, and see whether there is anything that you haven't thought about, anything that people react to and start questioning, and how you're answering to those questioning comments, whether you have good argument or you feel like, this I haven't thought through, this I didn't think about. This kind of conversation can really help a lot.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is you don't need an expert in your field to do that. What the best that you can have is somebody just like you, really, ask, well, why do you think that way? What made you come to that conclusion? And in fact, the fact that they don't know a lot of stuff actually can help, because they might generally say, well, I don't understand why you came to that conclusion, and it might be obvious to you, and maybe even to an expert, but sometimes, both you may have been wrong. You may both have jumped to the same conclusion. And somebody can sort of say, well, look, explain it to me. And then you have to go through the steps and, okay, I understand that. And what was the next one? And, and I'm missing how come did you conclude that? You say, well, I assumed, and then you said, so you made an assumption there. So it's really about somebody questioning, your train of thought, your assumptions, your conclusions, and then following that path through. That could help you, avoid some of the. And if that person, by the way, understands something about cognitive biases, then all the better, because they can say, oh, wait, I noticed that you did that. That sounds to me like that kind of bias. Is that true? Or, and you say, no, it's not true, it's actual. And you say, well, yeah, good point. Maybe that does have something to do with it.
And I just want to maybe start summarizing this or wrapping up with inviting you, everyone, to the Helix of Success group in LinkedIn. If you feel like you don't have anyone to throw ideas at, so to say, and test your assumptions, test your thoughts and actions that you're planning on someone, just join the group and throw your ideas there, or say, hey, I'm thinking of, or have an idea about this and that. Is anyone here up for a discussion or for questioning me? Because I want to shed light on my blind spots.
Yeah.
That's what we want to build there with this group. Build a community of people who can support each other with the expertise, with the questions, with the willingness to develop together. So please join, and let's create the conversations there to help each other to take the decisions in a better, healthier, more sustainable way.
Yeah, please do. Something we can help, we'd be happy to.
Anything else, Roelof, you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think we've done enough. We've gone through some of so we'll leave it at that.
Great. So I dropped the links to the original post that we showed the video from in the beginning, and also to the graphics with the infographics with the 50 cognitive biases. Please check them out and let us know what you think about them. Do you have any questions? Do you want to take up any of those particular biases in the coming Helix of Success weekly lives? Let us know. We'll be happy to take your feedback into account. And have a wonderful week, everyone. I see a comment from Jack here, or Jock, sorry. Thanks, very interesting and informative. Thank you, Jock, for joining, and let us know what you think. Which biases are you struggling with most, and how would you like to address them?
Yeah, thanks, Jock, for the remark.
Bye, everyone.